Yes, it's still Africa Update on Trust Television, and I'm your host, Chiamaka Nwafor. Now, let's get to it. This week, we're giving you updates on what's happening on the continent. We're going to start with Senegal, where its president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, on Thursday announced he had dissolved the opposition-dominated parliament and set new legislative elections for November 17th. Faye made the disclosure on national TV. Here's more from Press 24.
Determined to deliver on his campaign pledges, Senegal's new president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, announced the dissolution of the country's opposition-led parliament on Thursday.
Unfortunately, the parliamentary majority has decided to go against the will of the Senegalese people. I'm dissolving the National Assembly and ask the people to give me the constitutional means to enact the systemic transformation that I promised.
Faye was elected in March on an anti-establishment platform and pledges to battle corruption, improve living standards, and reassert Senegal's national sovereignty. But 6 months later, these reforms have yet to materialize, with the president blaming the National Assembly for systematically blocking his proposals. The dissolution now paves the way for snap legislative elections, which Faye says will be held on November 17th, in just over 2 months. A risky gamble for the 44-year-old head of state, who hopes his popularity, especially among young voters, can help his PASTEF party secure a fresh majority in parliament.
Historically, the Senegalese people tend to give the president the means to enact his policies following a presidential election.
Meanwhile, the Benno Bokk Yakaar opposition platform, led by former President Macky Sall, condemned the dissolution of parliament and accused Faye of perjury, another sign that political tensions continue to run high in the West African country.
From there, we're going to go over to Gabon, where Gabonese lawmakers began discussions on the new constitution, a key step towards restoring civilian government after the 2023 coup that ended 55 years of Bongo family rule. The proposed constitution includes abolishing the prime minister's post, establishing a 7-year presidential term renewable once, and requiring presidential candidates to have Gabonese-born parents. It also defines marriage as between a man and a woman, makes military service compulsory, and confirms French as the official language. Lawmakers have until September 22nd to finalize the text, with the referendum planned before year-end as part of a 2-year transition led by General Brice Oligui Nguema, who plans to run in the 2025 presidential election. And from Gabon, we go to Central Sahel, where Russian mercenaries hired to provide security in Burkina Faso began leaving the country in late August, they say, to resist Ukraine's recent incursion into Russia. Data show the mercenaries have had little impact on the Sahel's war against Islamic terrorist groups. As Henry Wilkins reports, Burkina Faso saw one of the deadliest militant attacks in recent years, the same week the Russians left.
Militants killed between 100 and 300 people in this August 24th attack on a town in northern Burkina Faso. It was one of the deadliest in the Sahel by groups linked to the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. It came the same week a group of Russian mercenaries known as the Bear Brigade announced a partial withdrawal from the West African country to help counter Ukraine's incursion into Russia's Kursk region. One expert told VOA the mercenaries had been assisting with personal security for Burkina Faso's military leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, and government officials.
Their withdrawal raises a lot of questions about what will happen to the security of these Burkinabe officials, who, it must be said, are facing a number of challenges.
Since September last year, Traoré has fended off 2 attempted coups, according to authorities. He came to power in a 2022 coup himself, claiming the previous military junta had failed to turn the tide in the country's war against Islamic militants. He also ended military cooperation with France and left the regional political bloc ECOWAS, enlisting the help of Russian mercenaries to aid in the war effort instead. Russian intervention has not stemmed the rise of Islamic terrorist groups in the Sahel, but Ian says.
It's true that the situation today continues to be bad, since the Burkinabe army is being pushed out of large swaths of land in many parts of the country with the rise in power of Jnim and ISIS.
In recent years, Russia has also sent mercenaries to Mali and Niger. Deaths from conflict have increased by 26% in the three countries in the last year. Data from the non-profit Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project show.
Now, the United States has announced its support for adding 2 permanent seats for African nations on the UN Security Council, alongside a non-permanent seat for a small island developing nation. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, highlighted this as a follow-up to President Joe Biden's earlier pledge to expand the Council's 15-member body. Currently, Africa has 3 non-permanent seats, but the U.S. believes this isn't sufficient to represent the continent's voice. The U.S. supports 2 permanent seats for Africa, aligning with African nations' desires for fair representation. However, Washington opposes granting veto power to these new seats, arguing that it would make the Council dysfunctional. This stance reflects the limits of the power the U.S. is willing to extend. The UN Security Council, which has remained unchanged since its inception in 1945, consists of 5 permanent members with veto power. They are the United States, Russia, China, Britain, and France. Efforts to reform the Council have been ongoing since 1979, with calls for it to be more representative and efficient. However, disagreements over how to achieve this have stalled progress. Still staying with security-related matters, in an interview with VOA, UN experts say terror groups in Africa are increasing the use of drones to carry out operations previously only possible for nation-states. Reporter Henry Wilkins looks at how this makes the work of African states fighting insurgencies even more difficult.
These drone images, which VOA has been unable to independently verify, purport to show Al-Shabaab's attack on an airport in Kenya in 2021, as well as the use of drones by the armed groups JNIM and ISWAP to coordinate attacks in Mali and Nigeria. According to UN experts, terror groups in Africa linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State are making increasing use of consumer drones to carry out operations.
Airborne capability, so allows them to have better view of the battle space and their operating environments. Also provides them with a new way of being able to gather intelligence, and in that way also to plan and coordinate attacks. Also sometimes with a higher degree of lethality and precision.
Experts point out that militaries fighting insurgencies and facing terrorist threats from the air for the first time are at a disadvantage. Karen Allen, a senior research advisor at the Institute for Security Studies, has written extensively on the subject of drone use by terror groups.
It conveys a significant psychological advantage to armed groups who in the past may have been at a disadvantage compared to regular armies. So it's leveled the playing field, if you like, between regular forces and irregular forces.
While it's unclear exactly how many incidences of drone use by terror groups there have been in Africa, instances have been recorded in Somalia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, and Mozambique. Figueiredo says the Central Sahel has borne the brunt of the new trend, however, which has spread from IS and Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria to their affiliates in Africa. Allen adds that the use of drones by terror groups is difficult to stop because drones are easy to buy for civilian use on the internet.
I think there is a real difficulty in being able to stop the use of a technology which is a dual-use technology. I mean, think of a mobile phone. Mobile phone can be used most of the time to be able to communicate and have a completely benign purpose, but it can also be used to trigger a tripwire and to cause an ID to explode.
She adds that African nations need to invest in anti-drone systems. This may include tech that jams radio signals, disabling drones, and even anti-drone lasers.
Well, we're going on a short break. When we come back, we'll tell you more what's happening as a Ghana journalist on the front line battles against AI-generated deepfakes. Do stay with us. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Africa Updates, where we give you insights on what's happening on the African continent. Now let's get back to more stories. Now, Ghana's journalists on front line in battle against AI-generated deepfakes. Bernard Avell hosts one of the biggest morning shows in Ghana, but scammers used artificial intelligence or AI to clone his voice to endorse a product. Analysts warn the same technology could be used to spread disinformation ahead of Ghana's elections in December. For VOA News, Senanu Turret reports from Accra.
Your financing conditions are not favorable and you've been forced.
From the studios of City FM in Accra, Bernard Avell's voice reaches tens of thousands of Ghanaians every weekday. Along with his team, the radio and TV host engages the nation on the award-winning City Breakfast Show and on his TV show, The Point of View.
I use a talk program platform to raise important development issues, but I also use the power of good interviews to question our duty bearers to actually demand for accountability.
But that voice of accountability has been hijacked.
Somebody called me and said, Bernard, I'm calling to check on the sex enhancement medicine that you discussed on your TV show last week. I was like, whoa, what are you talking about?
Avell says perpetrators used artificial intelligence tools to clone his voice and show, then broadcast it on Facebook. To make it authentic, they used his show's introduction.
Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. Here on the...
But instead of talking about current affairs, the AI version promoted products.
This is me they're using, and then a voice that sounds like mine somehow learns how I introduce my show.
The people are coming up with new systems.
Computer scientist and researcher Kweku Andoyamwa notes a surge in deepfake cloning technology since 2022, with tools now easily accessible.
They charge you $1, which gives you access to clone your voice in like 3 steps. You repeat 3 phrases, and then you have a cloned version of your voice saying anything.
In an election year, the easy access to AI poses a serious threat to Ghana's peace and security, analysts say. During the 2020 election, fake news and misinformation led to unrest, and at least 8 deaths linked to political violence were recorded. Some worry that cloning technologies could make the situation worse this year. City FM has already seen increased disinformation. It says perpetrators are using the media outlet's brand and credibility to spread disinformation. For this reason, City FM is introducing security features to flag fake news and clone content in their widely circulated photos and stories. Using QR code technology, audiences can easily verify images. It is also piloting a fact-checking project funded by the Danish Embassy in partnership with the Ghana Center for Democratic Development. It brings together forensic and investigative journalists.
And then we are going the step further of also getting tech involved, combating it, and actually showing proof of the behind the scenes of actually we getting the verification of those disinformation content.
Alongside fact-check initiatives in Ghana are calls for greater public education in media literacy and the detection of fake media in the run-up to elections.
From Ghana, we're going to move to climate-related matters. The summer of 2024 set new global heat records, with Africa severely impacted by extreme heat waves, primarily driven by human-caused climate change rather than the El Nino phenomena. Africa News has more.
The summer of 2024 has marked the hottest on record globally, and Africa has been particularly impacted by extreme heat waves that have devastated communities and threatened livelihoods. According to Wise Voter Institute, 10 African countries are facing unprecedented heat, with some regions experiencing prolonged drought and crop failures.
This was the warmest August and the warmest summer on record globally, and this is happening in a moment where, as we were discussing, El Nino is no longer the main driver. We still have some warmth in the Pacific, but we still have very warm ocean elsewhere, so it's no longer El Nino. And of the many drivers of climate variability, I think one of the one we need to look into in this case as a main responsible is really the anthropogenic climate change and the increase in greenhouse gases in our atmosphere.
Burkina Faso, Mali, and Senegal top the list of the most affected countries in Africa. Africa, already vulnerable to climate impact due to its geographical position and economic challenges, is among the hardest hit continents.
Now let's take a look at women-related matters. Despite global efforts to stop the practice of female genital mutilation, the harmful tradition continues to affect the lives and health of millions of women and girls in Somalia. Reporter Najib Ahmed has the story from the capital Mogadishu, narrated by Anthony Labruto for the VOA.
This 17-year-old girl lives with her family in a camp for the internally displaced in Mogadishu. She says she is the victim of female genital mutilation, or FGM, a harmful traditional practice defined by the World Health Organization as the partial or total removal of the external female genitalia for non-medical reasons. Since the procedure at 12 years old, she has lived with persistent pain, health problems, and emotional trauma. She chose to speak to VOA anonymously because she fears backlash for speaking about a taboo topic.
I went through a lot of pain, lost a lot of blood because of excessive bleeding, and suffered from recurring infections, which still gives me nightmares. I hope my sisters will not undergo the pain I went through.
FGM persists in Somalia because of the common belief that uncut girls and women are promiscuous, unclean, and physically undesirable. The United Nations says that 98% of Somali girls and women ages 15 to 49 have undergone some form of FGM. Midwife Shamsa Ali Mohammed performed FGM for over 20 years, but now she is one of the many women fighting to end the practice, which she calls circumcision. The United Nations Population Fund, or UNFPA, discourages the use of the term, pointing out that female circumcision is a violation of human rights and a much different procedure from male circumcision.
We used to circumcise a lot of girls, but we have now stopped the practice since IFRA Foundation trained us. We now raise awareness against FGM as it hurts women and girls, and many are suffering during labor because of this harmful practice.
IFRA Foundation is a non-profit working to end FGM in Somalia. Its founder, Somali-Irish social activist Ifra Mohammed, says her organization's engagement have persuaded hundreds of people to pledge not to practice any form of FGM.
I don't want people to see me just integrating to the community. So we trained all the leaders, religious leaders, women's group, authorities in districts. So we allowed them to start the conversation and build the dialogue about female genital mutilation.
Another organization, SASA Together, aims to mobilize the community and also aims to abolish FGM. Mohammed Mursal is a UNFPA program specialist who works with SASA Together.
As an organization, we are fighting to eradicate FGM in Somalia by closely working with the government of Somalia, especially the Minister of Family Affairs, to come up with a legal framework that criminalizes FGM in Somalia.
Although the Somali constitution prohibits FGM and describes it as cruel and degrading, no national law exists that criminalizes the practice. Anti-FGM activists say that unless that happens, girls and women will continue to suffer.
There's so many ways to engage people and help them not to endanger themselves or get involved in crime-filled life. That's what a Kenyan police officer, Stephen Ominde, is doing. He has his way of fighting crime. In 2020, he started the Matere soccer team to keep young people off the streets and out of trouble. 4 years on, the team is still going strong. Reporter Joel Masibo has more from Matere, Nairobi in Kenya.
Make sure you're okay. Let's go, let's go.
30-year-old Stephen Ominde has been in the police force for 8 years. 4 of them in Matere Valley, a crime-ridden informal settlement in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, with a population of about 500,000.
The youth here have difficult opportunities, so they are easily drawn into crimes. So I wanted to show them the different way of getting the opportunities, and I chose football because football has been my vehicle.
Despite a lack of more recent statistics, security personnel and residents like Austin Otieno say that Ominde's soccer initiative, which kicked off 4 years ago, has impacted youth behavior, crime rates, and incidents of police violence.
We've seen a significant drop in crime and police confrontations. The community feels safe and more united.
Now I focus on my studies and dream of becoming a professional soccer player.
Because of the soccer program, at least 50 former juvenile delinquents are now contributing members of society. Parents like Irene Wakoli say they now have a purpose, self-discipline, and understand the value of teamwork.
This program has changed our lives. My son is now a role model in our community. Before, I worried that one day I will lose him in a street fight or a confrontation with the police. All this has changed.
ACLED, a non-profit organization tracking global conflict and protest data, found that between July and September 2023, there were 176 fatalities linked to political violence involving the police. The bulk of these incidents occurred in Nairobi County, which saw a significant surge in anti-government protests during this period. That's where Ominde's initiative comes in. Fellow police officers are also inspired to engage with young people through sports. In Kangemi, another informal settlement in Nairobi, officers like Johnston Etale started a soccer team in his area of jurisdiction. Ominde says the initiative serves a purpose in the community.
The hostility between the police and the youth has caused a lot of tension in the community. Finding creative ways to deal with young people suffering difficult economic conditions is the only way to have peace in the community.
For these boys, soccer team is more than just a sport. It's a lifeline. It provides hope and shaping their future. That's good marking, good marking.
Wow, a very inspiring story there, showing that we all can do what we can to help our youngsters stay out of crime and help the nation at large in the long run. That's much we have for you today on Africa Update, where we'll be giving you something very interesting and informative. My name is Chiamaka Nwafor. Don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms for more news, programs and documentaries. Same time, same place next week. Bye for now.